Hi everyone, thanks for coming along today. We're going to be discussing today an interesting matter that we've been working on in the insolvency team here. So I've given you a printout, just a summary of the matter, but it relates to Port Cod. We act for the liquidators of ABC Proprietary Limited, who were appointed by an order of the court following the company's failure to comply with the statutory demand. So it's been an interesting matter from the start, given that the company has been linked to a number of individuals who are either being investigated or have been charged with fraud in relation to matters unrelated to the company, but it gives you a bit of a flavour of sort of the characters that we're dealing with. So the company is a trustee of the ABC Trust, and the primary asset that the company holds on trust is Port Cod, which is an unfinished coastal development. So Port Cod consists of a commercial lot, as well as a number of developed residential lots, which people currently reside on, and a number of unfinished residential lots. It also includes some marina berths, which currently require dredging, as well as a sewage treatment plant, which services the current residential lots and will also service the remaining lots once they are developed. So there are a number of stakeholders at play or involved in the liquidation. In relation to the secured creditors, two of those are British Virgin Island registered entities, which has made it difficult for the liquidators to identify the individuals or the entities behind those companies. There's also a considerable amount of land tax and rates owing on the properties, and those two items combined come to a total of greater than $2 million. The Department of Environment and Heritage Protection is also a stakeholder, and their concerns relate to the STP, which, due to some confusion about who is in possession of the STP or who is managing the STP, there is a real risk of environmental damage occurring, which is heightened by the fact that the port is located next to an environmentally protected area. Now, some other stakeholders include the landowners, the current residents at Port Cod. Now, they were the petitioning creditors in the winding up proceedings, and they were unhappy with how the company was developing Port Cod, and for the most part they are behind the liquidators. However, I will caveat that with the fact that they have their own agenda, particularly in relation to the sewage treatment plant, and as I'll discuss a bit later, that is causing some headaches. And finally, there are a number of unsecured creditors who have invested a significant amount of money in the company with likely zero return. They're pretty unhappy because, to an extent, the wool was pulled over their eyes about where this port development was going to go. So liquidators have faced a number of practical issues in this liquidation, and one of the initial issues faced was the fact that they couldn't obtain substantial books and records or sufficient books and records of the company. Now, that was despite making requests to the liquidators of the company and previous advisors of the company who failed to provide anything or many documents in response to those requests. Another issue that the liquidators are facing there is that the secured creditors have exercised their rights of possession over some, but not all of the lots in the development. Now, this creates an issue because effectively the control of the lots in the development is split between the mortgagee and between the liquidators, and it makes it difficult for the liquidators to go about assessing the value of the development and considering whether the return for creditors is going to be greatest if the development is sold as a whole or sold in a piecemeal fashion. Another practical issue that the liquidators are facing in this liquidation is quite unique. They're dealing with legal advisors who the liquidators consider to be in a position of conflict. Now, those legal advisors act for both the secured creditor and the residents. whose interests aren't entirely aligned, particularly when you take looking at the issue of the STP. So the residents' desires in relation to the STP don't necessarily match that of the secured creditor, which would be looking to maximise return from the sale of the development as a whole, not necessarily in a piecemeal way. And finally, it's quite a common issue for liquidators, but the liquidators are without funds in this liquidation, apart from some disputed funds, which we'll talk to about in a moment, which it does make it difficult for them, as it's unlikely that they'll be getting a return. Also, a number of legal issues that the liquidators are facing here. So upon their appointment, under the trust deed, the company was removed as trustee of the trust. So that means, therefore, that the company is currently a bare trustee, and the liquidators aren't empowered to deal with the property. Another legal issue that came into play in this liquidation was one of the secured creditors refused to substantiate its debt, which it said was secured by its mortgage. And as I mentioned before, due to the lack of books and records, the liquidators weren't able to establish whether that debt did exist. Subsequently, the court has found that no debt did exist, that it was a sham, and the court has ordered that creditors' mortgage be removed. Another legal issue for the liquidators has been the potential personal liability under the environmental authority that relating to the sewage treatment plant. So this has some similarities to the Link decision, although I note in that decision it was in relation to an environmental protection order, whereas here it's an environmental authority. Finally, another issue a legal issue that's come into play is that of a quis-closed trust. So one of the creditors has claimed a quis-closed trust over some funds, or the only funds held by the liquidators, whereas the liquidators are of the view that there was no intention there, and therefore for a quis-closed trust to be formed. So therefore the funds become property of the company to be used in the winding up. So where to from here? Due to the issue of the bare trustee, the liquidators are considering whether they seek orders to be appointed as court-appointed receivers so that they can deal with and sell the trust assets, namely the Port Cod development. They also need to consider whether they disclaim the sewage treatment plant as onerous property. If they did do that, the personal liability or potential personal liability under the environmental authority would cease. But they need to weigh that up against the fact that it might not be in the best interest of the creditors if they disclaim that property, because, as I mentioned before, the potential benefit of selling the development as a whole rather than in a piecemeal fashion or selling the development without these sewerage facilities. So the liquidators have really been taking a commercial approach to this liquidation, and have engaged throughout the process, have engaged with the various stakeholders with the view of trying to obtain their cooperation to the liquidators' plan, and have them support the liquidators in being empowered to sell the property or take the further steps that are required. So already it's been a really interesting liquidation. It's still a fair way to go yet, and it's definitely a bit of a watch this space for further developments. So thanks for coming along. If you've got any questions, just let me know. But, thank you.